Firstly, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sateesh from Easology. I'd like to welcome you to this call and thank you for joining this Lunch and Learn session today at TechShare Pro on the first day. Just before we begin, I'd just like to say a couple of things. We've got Tim Griffin and Bridget Bree who will be doing our signing today. Tim will do the first 15 minutes and Bridget will do the second 15 minutes. Along with me on this call are my colleagues, Peter Ashall and Richard Ashall, who I'll introduce a little bit more in a moment. And the other thing to say, if there's questions, please type them in the Slido. I think it's to the right of the screen, and we will answer them as we go along. So let me start. So the question today that I'd like to pose to the group and try and answer partially and then have a discussion is why the user interface is a key accessibility challenge in an ever demanding world. So just before we begin, let me introduce myself properly. My name's Sateesh Ramoutar. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer for Easology. On the call is Dr. Peter Ashall. He's the co-founder and Chief Executive of Easology, and Richard Ashall, who's the Chief Technical Officer from Easology. And you'll hear from Peter and Richard along the way in the presentation. Just so you know, we've got about, I'd say about 6 or 7 minutes of presentation, a few minutes with a live demonstration from Richard, and then the second half of the call, which is the second 15 minutes, we've got some discussion points and a chance really to dive in things together and have an interactive session. So I hope that's okay. So I want to take us back to 2010. Seems a long time ago already now, nearly 8 years. So 2010, I'd like you to meet Suku. Suku was a 77 years old retired university lecturer. In 2010, Suku had a house phone and he used his house phone to call. He had a mobile phone, but it was a feature phone, so not a smartphone, just a simple small screen with buttons. He had never been online in 2010, and he had no Wi-Fi connection in his home. And Suku still did all of his tasks in 2010 in a traditional way. So what do I mean? He went shopping. He went to the local market, he went to the supermarket, he went to the shops. If he needed to do his banking, he'd go down to the local branch. His entertainment was mainly delivered by the TV. That was his preferred, and he had Sky, and he accessed it through his remote control. And for any services he needed, for example, medical services, he would go down to the local doctor's surgery and access them. So everything was done in a fairly traditional way. But he was curious about the internet in 2010. So what was the solution for Suku, who was curious about the internet, but was still doing most of his tasks in the traditional way? Well, first of all, he tried a tablet, and I know this because I got him the tablet, and it didn't work. He couldn't use the tablet. He couldn't navigate the tablet. He didn't find it, for him, intuitive in a way that he could actually use properly. I tried a mobile phone, same thing. He couldn't really get to use it. He could use his feature phone, but he couldn't use a smartphone. He was struggling with it. So what was the solution for Suku in 2010? I got him a fairly easy to use, simplified, less functionality tablet. Just a few things, large buttons, large text that he could start to get used to and experience certain things from being online, which was great. The second thing I got him was a MiFi. So he didn't want to have a proper broadband connection to his house. He didn't want that cost. So we got him a MiFi, which had a small SIM card inside and gave him internet access. And the third thing I got him was a loving son, which was me. So I was always there on hand and would go around to his house probably 2 or 3 times a week to help him. And that was the solution for a curious Suku who still wanted to do things in a traditional way, do his shopping, but was curious about the internet. So that was 2010. Let's forward wind to today. Let's meet Jerry. Jerry's a 76-year-old retired electrical engineer. These are real people, by the way. He's been online for 22 years. So in 2022, 2023, he's actually been online now for 22 years. He has a smartphone and a tablet. He's competent online. not particularly fast, but very competent. But he's starting to get slight dexterity and visual impairment. Jerry does a large amount of his tasks online, probably the same as somebody 20, 30, 40 years younger would. He does his shopping online, he does his banking online, he does his entertainment online, he gets his services online. The internet is an essential component of Jerry's life. So the solution for Jerry is very different than the solution for Suku from 7, 8 years ago. Jerry has a Wi-Fi connection, very fast broadband connection to his house, and his preferred choice is a tablet like this. But the problem is just with a little bit of regular creeping age and very sort of slight visual and dexterity issues, Jerry's starting to struggle to use a tablet that's laid out and has an interface in this way. So we at Easology, we've identified 7 issues through extensive research that users like Jerry in 2022, going on to 2023, have, or in fact, anyone with visual dexterity impairment. It doesn't need to be an older person. So these are 7 issues that people can have using their smartphones and tablets. And it's not rocket science. It's fairly straightforward, simple things, but they can be major barriers and major challenges if this is what you need to use your smartphone and tablet. So firstly, when we spoke to did our research, a lot of people said to us, our apps disappear. And what we actually found was there was a lot of unintended deleting or moving of apps by pressing on the screen and not realizing that you've moved or deleted an app. The second thing that we found was that a lot of people said to us, my settings magically change. So my Wi-Fi turns off, my Bluetooth turns off, my auto rotate is switched on, my torch won't go off. And we found that people were selecting things from the notifications bar on the top without actually realizing. The third thing that people said to us was text size should be big, but it's difficult to change and I need to find it in every single app. The fourth thing that people said to us was icon buttons could be difficult to hit because sometimes they're just too small. And the fifth thing that said was layouts could be confusing. So even for people like Jerry who are competent online, just getting a little bit older could mean layouts could be confusing, but also technology is continually changing. And with those changes, suddenly a change in layout, a change in the system can actually throw you from your normal usage patterns. The sixth thing was that pinch and expand gestures could be difficult to use when doing magnification on online browsing. And the seventh thing, and this is actually true for, I'd say, the whole world, is settings can be an absolute minefield. So finding what you really need, even sometimes sort of really important accessibility options can be really difficult to find. And it can be quite frustrating at best, or even can be a complete barrier to usage if you can't find them. So these were 7 things, fairly simple things, that our research and people told us, especially older people, that they could start to find having when they're using their smartphone and tablet. So, but there was an 8th thing that we heard from a lot of people, and this is probably what's fundamentally different between Jerry in 2022 and Suku in 2010. People saying to us now they don't want to have an embarrassing baby phone. They want the latest technology. They want the latest features. They want the latest gadgets. I remember a lady we spoke to said, I don't want to be embarrassed when my grandkids come over. People want the latest tech. They don't want a baby phone, a simplified, low functionality product like maybe 10 or even 20 years ago. And the other thing that we heard a lot of was people said to us, we want technology to benefit us also. Technology is always increasing, marching forward, bringing new possibilities. Why is no one thinking of those possibilities that technology brings for us as a user group? So what have we done? We've teamed up with Samsung in a deep technical and commercial partnership to solve these issues and bring affordable access to the world's best technology. Samsung have, in my opinion, the world's best technology, or amongst the world's best technology. How can we bring them to everybody in a way that's easy to use, but also affordable? And this is also an important point. In this day and age, people shouldn't and often can't afford to pay a premium to have access. It should be affordable and access to the world's best technology. And luckily, we've got a great partner in Samsung to do that. So what do we do at Easology with Samsung? We try and simplify the user interface without reducing functionality, and address the 7 points that we spoke about earlier. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Richard Ashall, who will just give you an overview of the user interface that we've designed with Samsung. But then after that, we'll open it up for questions, discussions, and we've got a few really good discussion points as well that we'd like to get your input into today. Hopefully over to you, Richard. I will stop sharing. If you could just bear with Richard a moment as he connects and shares his screen. Just as we're doing so, I'll check with Peter that we haven't had any questions so far.
We're looking good.
Okay. Over to you, Richard.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Sateesh. Yes, this is just a quick run through of our interface. And before I start, just to make a note that the top and bottom blue bars are actually part of the sharing software that I'm using. Obviously, our goal with what we're trying to do is bring simplification, and the blue definitely is not doing that. So just so that we're kind of clear. So just to talk through some of the points that Sateesh mentioned and how we're addressing them with our interface. One of the first ones is the disappearing apps. So I've done it myself. So with Easology, we actually lock down the apps, and we have a dedicated app that we use called Arrange Apps to actually move apps around the home screen. And it's a straightforward process, and you can reorder them as you see fit. One of the other things Sateesh mentioned was the settings magically change. So with the drop-down notification bar that you have on many devices, often that's easily selected, and things that change, like turning Wi-Fi on and off, or airplane mode, or vibrate. And so we've actually disabled that completely. So if you drag down from the top of the screen, that's actually fully disabled. With Easology. Now with Easology, we also by default enable larger text throughout the interface. So for example, with BBC News here, the actual default size of the text is already large. We actually have the ability to increase that as well with our Easology settings. So you can see now the text is made even larger through just a couple of quick settings changes. So throughout our interface, we've tried to design everything as simple as possible. And one of the things we found with modern interfaces is they often remove the icon information. So with Easology, we've actually added back contextual information with sort of text to describe what each button does, so that the user always has some extra help to know where they are in the interface and what each of the function buttons do. We've designed the whole interface to have a bar at the bottom, and the back button always at the left, and the function buttons at the right. And that applies through every selection, through contacts and apps like calendar. And more simple apps like the clock. One of the other things Sateesh also mentioned was Zoom functionality with magnifiers, and particularly with the internet. So with our internet app, we have a dedicated buttons for zoom in and zoom out. and this allows you to significantly make the screen bigger and much easier to read. And just the last point that I just want to touch on is our simplified settings app. So, both iOS and Android today come with pretty extensive settings menus with many different options. And we've taken some of the best of those options and put them within our own settings app and simplified those as well. But we still have all of the core things that you would expect to use every day. For example, attaching to Wi-Fi, changing the font, and other some other things like changing the sounds. And that's me, Sateesh.
Thank you very much, Richard. Very much appreciated for the quick overview of our interface that we've designed and working on Samsung products and done in together with them. Let me just transfer back to my screen, if you just bear with me one moment, and then we're going to go to some questions. And I see sort of a couple of questions already popping up in the chat. Let me just. Can I just double check, Peter? Can you just tell me if you can see my screen okay?
Yeah, it's all clear.
Peter or Richard, can you just confirm if you can see my screen?
Yeah.
It's all clear, Sateesh, yes.
Thank you very much. So we've got now sort of a last sort of 10, 12 minutes or so, a little bit more interactive. We're going to have a few questions, then sort of a sharing a couple of minutes, and then a couple of discussion points if we get time to do it. So firstly, any questions? I can't actually see the Slido myself. So probably, Richard, can you see the questions? And if you could you read them out? And then sort of between myself and Peter or yourself, we can actually answer them.
Yeah, Sateesh, possibly I can pick up the first questions here. There's a couple of really interesting questions from Nikki and Patel. And the two questions are, you mentioned distinct personalities and common issues in the talk. What challenges have you faced designing interfaces to cater for a range of abilities? And secondly, was user testing incorporated into the design process? And if so, how regularly were the iterations of the interface tested? So maybe I can address those questions sort of on the fly as we go. And critical questions, actually. First of all, in terms of user testing, we've actually done on the go user testing at each stage of the design, and a lot of the principal design directions taken with the software were as a result of very specific user feedback, and it's something that we do and we continue to do on a regular basis. Two reasons for doing that. One is that we want to improve the core work that we have already done, and we know we can always continue to improve on that. And the only way to do it is to talk with people who are going to be sort of power users of the device. The second question is sort of related about the distinct personalities and common issues, but also catering for a range of abilities. So initially, our design is intended to cover as many people as we can, recognizing that there will be a range of abilities which we don't cover at this stage. So our intent is in moving forward. Well, first of all, Sateesh mentioned our technical involvement with Samsung means that we can make some deep changes to the way the device actually interacts with the user. And so the research that we'll be doing will be to understand what is needed and then applying the particular technical solutions that we have to that range of abilities. So it'll be a function of research and then leveraging the technical capabilities as well. We can certainly address this question in some more detail, and feel free to contact us directly for a more straightforward conversation and more detailed, perhaps.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Peter, is there more questions?
Yes,
Or
there is actually one from Pauline and Rosh. And do you find that the dryness of people's fingertips as they get older make laptops more accessible than tablets or phones with touch screens? And yes, and this is a challenge of older age. Our focus right now is with tablets and phones rather than laptops. In the future, maybe we can extend our thinking into the laptop area as well. But right now, we are working with tablets and phones. So maybe, Sateesh, we can move on to the questions you had here as well on the presentation.
Yeah, I'm actually going to skip. I'm going to come back to share if we have time. I want to talk about this point because actually this point refers a little bit to the questions that we've had. So the discussion point that we wanted to bring up today was what capability will an older and or visually dexterity impaired user of tomorrow demand from the user interface? We're a fairly new company. We launched last year. Our software is continually under development. And we know that we address some of the needs, but we haven't addressed all of the needs. So really interested to hear from the group on the call today, from their experience, what they believe are the important things for the user of tomorrow in terms of a user interface. Please just either shout up and get on the call or put some comments into the slider. Peter, I'm going to hand over to you as well.
Yeah, sure. So again, there's a really good question here from Pauline and Rosh as well. It's about the demographics of the users, and do they tend to be from more middle class and affluent backgrounds? So it's a good question because actually what we're trying to do with our work is to make the device and the software and the capabilities of the device and software available as broadly as possible. And the only way to do this is not to design specialist hardware, but to actually leverage the lowest cost devices that you can find on the market. And this is exactly what we've done. So basically, anybody who is potentially either in the market to buy a consumer device themselves or has potential access to consumer devices through local authorities, other means, the addition of what we're doing is very low cost indeed to solve this particular problem. So we're actually trying to democratize the availability of technology as much as is possible, given the lowest cost bases that are available. And this is a core part of where we started our work. Rich, there is a question here about the UI changes that we've applied, and if you'd like to tackle that one.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, for example, the persistent back button. I'll read the question first. So do the UI changes you've applied, i.e. the persistent back button on the left, menu on the right, apply uniformly across all apps from the Play Store? So currently it just applies to the Easology apps. So the custom ones that we've built with contacts and calendar, for example. And the Play Store apps are their own interface. We do have the home button that always takes you back to the Easology interface itself, but Play Store apps are still their own design.
So, I mean, one thing that we're looking at the moment about how we develop our software for the next version. The things that we think and want to do from, for example, like remote access. We're going to make some improvements to keyboards. We're also going to look at some main used apps like Zoom and give them the Easology treatment, for want of a better word. What I'd be really interested to hear from anybody on the call in the last few minutes is what they believe the user of tomorrow needs. One thing that we have, for example, is a continual debate about is the use of speech recognition and whether to include it. It's included somewhat, but whether to really put a lot of research and development into that, it can also be confusing. So anything that people think the user of tomorrow would demand, please please speak up.
Perhaps just 1 point to add in here as well, Sateesh, that and this sort of comes out of one of the questions a bit earlier as well, that actually people buy these kind of devices to use the services, and we are seeing a very rapid move of all kinds of services, as alluded to earlier, to banking, to health, and shopping, and all kinds of services are migrating to these devices. So a lot of our work over the next year or two will be about how to better integrate services. Issues today like double factor authentication are a mystery, I think, to most people, particularly when it all happens on separate and different devices. So the world of technology and services at the moment, I think, is sort of diverging away from where the sort of users that we're looking to help really need it to be, and that's something that we think we can really add value to. There's a second a comment here from Nikki Mattel as well, and this is regarding haptic feedback. And it's very interesting. We started our research looking at haptic feedback, and the question is, have you considered making use of inbuilt phone features using haptic feedback to support those who prefer physical confirmation of an action? And in fact, we do have haptic feedback enabled on the devices as standard. So we're combining both audible feedback and physical feedback as well. And this is user selectable. And we're actually looking at ways in which we can improve the haptic feedback so that some people find it intolerable and some people find it necessary. And we're just looking at ways in which that can be tailored so that it can be most useful. As we head towards the end here, question, I think speech recognition is a crucial addition. We work with many users with severe dexterity issues that require options for a range of input methods. And I think we'd absolutely agree with that. And again, this is going to be part of our next phase of work. The speech recognition that's available in devices is absolutely available to us to use. And the key question is how we implement it in a way which is most useful to the type of users that we're looking to provide the products for. Improved gestures, and I think this is from Nivian Morales. Double tapping on the screen would activate magnification. If I'm typing a quick text or a double tap, magnification starts. And yes, you're right. I think one of the problems we have is the number of gestures that someone has to remember to actually activate different types of functionality. And we're always looking at where do we draw the line? You know, where do we draw the line on included functionality and not included functionality? And I think what we would love is to have feedback from anybody who is on this call to give pointers as to where we should take our next generation of work. Actually, that I know in this in TechShare Pro 2022, there is a lot of deep understanding of the issues that people are facing, and so we'd love to hear back from you. You have on the screen there, you have our email addresses. Please feel free, and we'd really encourage you to get in touch with us, to give us feedback on basically what you've heard today, but also explore with us on how we could direct our future work. Fine, yes, go ahead.
Okay. So I didn't hear the last bit, Peter, but I think we're going to have to close the session now because we've got only 30, well, it's 1 o'clock. I'd like to thank everybody for taking their time today to attend the session. Very much appreciated and lovely to meet everybody. And I wish you all a great rest of the day.
Yes, thank you.